Unforgettable intimacy is not really about technique alone. Technique can matter, attraction matters, and chemistry matters. But what makes intimacy truly memorable usually goes much deeper than the physical. People rarely remember a moment only because of what happened on the surface. They remember how it made them feel emotionally, mentally, and energetically. They remember whether there was anticipation, whether they felt deeply desired, whether they felt chosen, whether they felt safe enough to let go, and whether the experience felt ordinary or uniquely shared. If you really want to understand what makes intimacy unforgettable, there are three core elements that matter more than almost anything else: tension, impact, and connection. And beyond those three, there is one more element that keeps intimacy exciting over time, and that is variety. Tension is where unforgettable intimacy begins, and it does not begin in the bedroom. It starts long before that, in the way two people look at each other, in the way they speak, in the pauses between words, in eye contact that lingers just a little longer, and in the feeling that something is building before anything physical even happens. Tension is often misunderstood because many people assume intimacy becomes stronger when everything moves quickly. But in reality, desire often grows through anticipation. It grows in the space where something is felt but not rushed. It is in the pause before a kiss, in the playful pullback, in the smile that says there is more to come, and in the energy that lets the moment breathe instead of forcing it forward. When intimacy is slowed down just enough, it becomes more vivid, more emotionally charged, and more memorable. That is because the mind becomes involved, imagination becomes involved, and the whole experience becomes more than physical. It becomes psychological and emotional. Real tension is not about playing games or creating confusion. It is about presence, confidence, pacing, and allowing desire to build naturally. It is the ability to say, through energy and body language, that there is no rush and that the moment itself matters. Impact is the second element, and this is something many people underestimate. Unforgettable intimacy is not only about what one person does, but also about how that experience is received. One of the deepest desires in intimate connection is to feel that your presence truly matters, that your touch, your effort, your energy, and your attention genuinely affect the other person. That is why authentic response is so powerful. Not exaggerated reactions, not performance, and not pretending to feel something that is not real, but genuine, visible response. When someone feels that their presence is truly reaching you, it deepens both desire and confidence. They no longer feel like they are simply going through motions. They feel like they are connecting, like they are creating something real in that moment. People remember experiences where they felt they had emotional impact, where they felt wanted, appreciated, and able to bring the other person joy. A genuine smile, a shift in breathing, a change in expression, a hand reaching back, soft eye contact, or a simple, honest word can say more than anything dramatic ever could. These small but real responses create a feedback loop where one person's desire fuels the other person's openness, and that openness invites even more connection. That is when intimacy stops feeling mechanical and starts feeling unforgettable. Connection is the third core element, and this is what turns intimacy from an experience into a bond. Tension creates anticipation. Impact creates emotional charge. But connection is what makes it personal. It is what gives the moment meaning beyond attraction alone. One of the simplest ways connection is created is through shared emotional presence and honest language. When intimacy becomes about what two people are creating together, rather than what one person is doing for the other, everything changes. A simple phrase that expresses closeness, appreciation, or emotional truth can transform the meaning of the moment. It reminds both people that this is not just about performance or physical satisfaction, but about being present with each other. Many people carry hidden insecurities into intimate moments. They wonder if they are enough, if they are getting it right, if they are truly desired, or if the connection is genuine. These insecurities are often never spoken, but they still shape the experience. That is why emotional presence matters so much. When someone feels seen, appreciated, and emotionally safe in an intimate moment, they remember it far more deeply. Physical attraction may create the opening, but emotional connection is what makes intimacy sustain its meaning over time. Without that emotional layer, physicality eventually starts to feel repetitive or empty. But when intimacy includes honesty, warmth, and real shared presence, it becomes something that feels alive and unique to that connection. There is also a fourth element that keeps intimacy alive over time, and that is variety. Even when tension, impact, and connection are present, predictability can slowly drain energy out of intimacy if nothing ever changes. This does not necessarily mean love has faded or attraction has disappeared. It simply means that the mind and body adapt quickly to repetition. What is always experienced in the same way can begin to lose intensity, not because it is bad, but because it no longer feels new. Variety matters because desire responds to novelty, movement, and shifts in energy. That does not mean becoming someone else or forcing dramatic change. It simply means allowing more dimensions of the connection to exist. Sometimes intimacy is soft and slow, sometimes playful and teasing, sometimes emotionally intense, sometimes spontaneous and surprising. Sometimes it is the change in pace, sometimes the change in mood, sometimes the change in environment, and sometimes just a different kind of emotional energy. Variety keeps the experience from becoming automatic. It allows both people to keep discovering each other rather than only repeating familiar patterns. In long-term connection especially, comfort is important, but comfort alone does not sustain passion. Passion needs movement, attention, creativity, and the willingness to keep meeting each other in new ways. Another important truth is that intimacy is never meant to be carried by one person alone. It is not one person's responsibility to create all the tension, all the emotional safety, all the excitement, all the variety, and all the connection. That only leads to pressure and exhaustion. Truly meaningful intimacy is always co-created. One person can influence the energy and open the door, but for intimacy to remain unforgettable over time, both people have to participate. Both people have to stay present, responsive, curious, and emotionally available. The strongest intimate bonds are not built through performance from one side, but through mutual presence from both. They are built when two people consciously or unconsciously decide that they want this to be more than routine. They want to keep showing up for each other, keep noticing each other, and keep creating something that feels alive rather than automatic. At its core, unforgettable intimacy is not about impressing someone. It is about creating a space where both people feel more desired, more connected, more understood, and more free to be themselves. That is why tension matters, because it creates anticipation and charge. That is why impact matters, because people want to feel that their presence truly moves the other person. That is why connection matters, because physical intensity without emotional depth fades quickly. And that is why variety matters, because love may provide stability, but desire needs movement. If intimacy has started to feel flat, it does not always mean something is broken. Sometimes it simply needs more intention, more honesty, more visible appreciation, more emotional presence, more surprise, and more aliveness. The moments people remember are rarely the ones that were perfect. They remember the ones that felt real, the ones where time seemed to slow down, where they felt seen without judgment, wanted without pressure, and safe enough to open fully. That is the kind of intimacy that stays in someone's mind and deepens instead of fading. When tension, impact, connection, and variety come together, intimacy stops feeling ordinary and becomes something people do not just experience, but genuinely remember.